We've all been there, casually watching a horror movie, all is going well, all of the scares are hitting, the performances are doing the business, and whatever threat of the day is proving to do some majestic work as it causes chaos. Only for a scene to come completely out of nowhere, I feel like it's been inserted from an entirely different movie. Now, while the following films may not all be bona fide classics, the thing they share in common is that they all have those bizarre scenes that feel just, well, off. So with that in mind, I'm Andrew from What Culture Horror, and here are the most out-of-place scenes in horror movie history. The Playmate Change, Critters 2, the main course. For the most part, the Critters franchise is a fairly family-friendly one, navigating that fine line between PG-13 and the occasional 15 rated moment. This isn't a franchise known for its excessive gore, its strong profanity, or its extreme nudity, which makes one particular Critters 2 scene all the more jarring. Now, it's established in the first movie that alien bounty hunters Ugg and Lee are shapeshifters, with Lee regularly changing his appearance and Ugg opting to look like rock star Johnny Steele. So when Lee sees an issue of Playboy, he takes on the form of the model he sees. That would be Roxanne Kernahan, a real-life playmate turned actor. While Lee yet again taking on a new look is nothing out of the ordinary, the transformation itself is, with Kernahan's breasts bursting out of Lee's spacesuit as the now topless Lee struts off into the distance. Quite the visual. The Vomiting Leper, It, Chapter 2. Throughout Andy Muschietti's two It movies, Pennywise torments the Losers Club by shapeshifting into forms that encompass their greatest fears. So, because Eddie is a germaphobe, Pennywise attacks him under the guise of a leper. While wrestling with the creature, Eddie has a moment of clarity, where he refuses to allow Pennywise to scare him anymore, grabbing the monster and screaming defiantly at him. As a counter, the leper vomits a gallon of sludgy ick all over Eddie in a last-ditch attempt to scare him. But while that's happening, Juice Newton's Angel of the Morning is played in the background. Until this point, this confrontation had been pretty terrifying, even a little uplifting as Eddie was facing his fear head-on. But this song, it just ruins the whole moment. This would be like seeing Hannibal Lecter break out into Gangnam Style for a few seconds during a previously sinister scene. It just does not make sense and does not fit right. Kids talking about mortgages? Old. The films of M. Night Shyamalan vary wildly in quality, with the filmmaker having a particularly strange way of writing some of the younger characters in those movies. Case in point, Old. This 2021 film revolves a group trapped on a beach that causes them to rapidly age, and if they don't find a way to escape within one day, they will die. Well, the premise itself is actually quite an interesting one. What most people remember Old for is its unnatural dialogue, especially for the young boy, Trent. At one point, Trent says to another boy, "You can come to my house and make up stories. Then we can go to the same college together and become neighbors with mortgages." This line might work in a spoof like Scary Movie or The Brilliant Airplane, but not in an R-rated horror movie from somebody once labeled the next Spielberg. There is a lot of weird in Old, but kids discussing mortgages, yeah, that kinda takes the cake. The Man with No Ass. Doom. In the 2000 Doom movie, a group of space marines are set to investigate a research facility on Mars, and there, they're met by a technician known as Pinky. Confused why Pinky's lower body has been replaced with a cybernetic wheelchair, the marines ask what happened to the fella, where we're told that there was a mix-up when Pinky teleported to Mars. As it's explained, he went to one galaxy, his ass went to another. Even though Doom is a cheesy, often over-the-top R-rated movie, this line, yeah, it's just too ridiculous. To make matters worse, Pinky is a completely original character, not one pulled from the video game franchise the film is loosely based on, meaning somebody purposely came up with the idea of this guy's ass being teleported somewhere else, with the end result feeling like something pulled from a Spaceballs or a Galaxy Quest. The most hated scene of Peter Cushing's career. Frankenstein must be destroyed. Peter Cushing is one of horror's finest ever names. Heck, Peter Cushing is one of cinema's finest names, period. With such an illustrious career, there is one scene in Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed that the late actor said he detested more than any single other. The fifth of Hammer's Frankenstein movies. This time out, Cushing's Victor Frankenstein is looking to transplant the brain of his former assistant into a new body. But in a seriously messed up moment, Frankenstein at one point takes a break from his work to head to the bedroom of his landlady Anna and sexually assault her. Even though Frankenstein had long been a sinister character, there was usually a sense of charm and appeal to him. But this was a whole new level of disturbing. As per Anna actress Veronica Carlson, this scene was a last-minute addition to the film, with studio head Jimmy Carreras wanting to sex up the movie, which in itself is extremely messed up. Director Terence Fisher was against it, the actors were against against it, but Carreras ultimately got his way, making this likely the most disturbing scene in any Frankenstein movie ever. The locust suit. Exorcist II, The Heretic. When people talk about the worst sequels of all time, Exorcist II, man, that is a film that will always be brought up by anyone unfortunate to have seen this absolute stinker. Picking things up with a now 16-year-old Regan McNeil, part of the story here focuses on Dr. Kokomu, a man who freed himself from Pazuzu's clutches years ago. However, the scene where Father Lamont meets Kokomu is impossible to take seriously, since Kokomu wears an outfit that resembles a giant locust, and while the late great James Earl Jones was a phenomenal actor, not even he can stop this from looking like a D-list Spider-Man villain. Bafflingly, this isn't the weirdest bit here. Oh no, as Kokomu spits a tomato onto the ground, which is filled with spikes, and that Lamont falls onto and impales himself, only to be teleported to an office where Kokomu is dressed normally. Yeah, Exorcist II, man, it is quite the trip. Jelly side down, Devil. The basic premise of 2010's Devil revolves around 5 strangers stuck in an elevator as they start to mysteriously be killed one by one, with it becoming apparent that Satan is among them. Hail Satan! Given how this was written by M. Night Shyamalan, it's no surprise that there's big twists, quirky edits, and some interesting dialogue again. But one moment stands out for how, well, odd it all is. Throughout the movie, we see security staff and police watching the group on camera, where Ramirez, a security guard, suggests that yes, the devil is at play. While his colleagues immediately dismiss this idea, Ramirez looks to prove his point by dropping some toast on the floor. By his logic, because the toast landed jelly side down, that means Satan is nearby. Even though nobody takes him seriously, it's baffling how everyone in the room doesn't just burst out laughing in this entire moment. Baby oil and GPS, the Friday the 13th remake. Now, the Friday the 13th series has never been one to shy away from nudity, but never were such scenes as jarring as during the opening sequence of the Friday the 13th remake. Things open up here in extremely familiar fashion. A group of young campers running afoul of Jason Voorhees out in the middle of the woods, setting the table for a surprisingly solid redo. With Wade, Richie, and Richie's girlfriend Amanda around a campfire, Wade drones on about GPS, NASA, syncing up data, and other such, let's face it, technology waffle. All while Amanda, who sat behind Wade, starts to strip and then rubs baby oil over her bare breast, supposedly teasing her boyfriend with the promise of a good time. So many questions. Where did the baby oil come from? How did Wade not notice Richie mouthing his intentions to Amanda? And more importantly, when is Jason going to arrive to put a stop to this goofy scene? The answer to that would be approximately 90 seconds later, when a big fella bumps into Wade. Malice punches a woman while dressed as a bear. The Wicker Man remake. The Wicker Man is a stunning, magnificent movie, regarded as one of the finest horror movies of its generation and beyond. The 2006 Wicker Man remake, yep, not so much, with Nick Cage getting to Nick Cage harder than he's ever Nick Caged before, or since. When Cage's Malice learns that he's been lured to an island to serve as a sacrifice in a pagan ritual, he goes a little, well, nuts. Frantic, balmy, bonkers, nuts, all of it. Sure, there's the infamous bee scene, or even that weird dropkick moment, but the biggest moment of unintentional comedy comes when Malice punches a woman while dressed as a bear. Horror fans have seen this clip doing the rounds on social media so many times, so it's easy to get desensitized to how just absurd it all is. Think of it this way. Fans of the original movie may have paid for a ticket to see this remake on its opening day, hopeful of seeing a modern reimagining of an all-time classic, just to be greeted by the ridiculous scene of an Oscar-winning actor knocking a woman's lights out while dressed in an animal carcass. Yep, let that sink in. The song Camp Blood 8. Oh boy. Now, on a daily basis, I will watch a lot of bad movies. Camp Blood 8, though, that is certainly something else entirely. Technically the 10th film in the Camp Blood series, the plot here centers around a clown mask killer and his deranged mother, Sheila, as they butt heads with a volleyball team. This is as generic slashers get, with zero budget, a horrendous script, and some truly dreadful dialogue. In amongst the awfulness, though, there is one scene that feels way out of place, where we have one character tied up and being tormented by the mother, and that in itself is nothing particularly odd though, even if the mother insists on feeding the girl applesauce, so maybe it is kind of a little bit odd. Where things really take a WTF turn though is when Sheila pulls up her shirt, shows her breasts, and demands the girl sing a song to those boobs. Yes, really. And then she actually does sing a song to those boobs, delivering a short 20-second ditty featuring words I probably cannot say in this video. The whole scene makes the rest of the film, including a psychic ghost thing, a weird twerking sequence, and some bizarre father-son clown brother-in-law look fairly normal by comparison. Also, as a side note, even if you've not seen Camp Blood 8, be sure to head over to the Good Bad or Bad Bad YouTube channel to check out a phenomenal summary of this utter stinker. It is comedy gold. Dogs with human faces. A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. Freddy's Revenge is such a strange sequel, removing much of the dream elements introduced in the first film and instead being more of a possession story, where Freddy Krueger takes over young Jesse Walsh. In Elm Street 2's finale, Jesse's love interest Lisa chases Freddy to his hideout, only for her to encounter some bizarre demonic dogs with human-like faces. Now, this wouldn't be so out of place if there was any real point to this scene, but instead, the dogs leave as fast as they arrive. Yes, they're supposed to be Freddy's personal guard dogs, but why don't they attack Lisa? What was the point of all of this? And why wasn't this jarring scene cut from the film entirely? The answer is that this was merely a lazy way to elicit a cheap scare, but it was all just so unnecessary. Kung Fu Cowboys, Hellraiser Inferno. The Hellraiser franchise is one full of nightmarish imagery and atmosphere, as Pinhead and the Cenobites have such sights to show us. The Hellraiser franchise is also an incredibly mixed bag, with only the first 4 of the series' 11 movies getting a theatrical release. As for the 5th film, that's Hellraiser Inferno, which went straight to DVD. Here, Detective Thorne unleashes the iconic puzzle box and suffers strange hallucinations as a result. And when Thorne is chasing the suspect through the woods, he discovers the Cenobites, only to then be attacked by a gang of Asian cowboys who beat the tar out of him with some sweet martial arts moves. This whole sequence is just so odd, feeling like something from a Mortal Kombat film rather than a Hellraiser one. While Hellraiser Inferno has received a little more love in recent years, this scene, it still remains way too distracting. The flute scene, Alien Covenant. Prometheus and Alien Covenant were quite the mixed bag, but one of the undoubted highlights of those movies is the great Michael Fassbender. Having played David in that first film, Fassbender pulled double duty in Covenant, also playing Walter, another android that serves as David's polar opposite. Fassbender is fantastic in both roles, but the scene where David teaches Walter to play the flute, that features one very unfortunate line. Yep, I'll do the fingering. Of course, immature audiences across the globe chuckled at this line, with it feeling more like something out of an Austin Powers movie rather than from the Alien franchise. This sequence is designed to illustrate the differences between David and Walter, but despite Fassbender's best efforts, the line, it just comes off as all kinds of cringy. Do your thing, cuz. Texas Chainsaw 3D. Speaking of cringy lines, as someone who spent their hard-earned cash to watch the film in the cinema, I feel fully justified to say Texas Chainsaw 3D is total trash. Plot-wise, the film revolves around Heather, a young woman who returns to her grandmother's home to collect her inheritance, only to realize she herself is a long-lost member of the Sawyer family, who were wiped out years before by the local townsfolk. When the mayor finds out about Heather's heritage, he decides to have her killed, forcing Heather to team up with the infamous Leatherface during the film's final act. As she gets the upper hand in this fight for her life, Heather gets to hand Leatherface's trademark chainsaw to finish the job, uttering the line, "Do your thing, cuz." Not only is this the dumbest line of a dumb movie, it also makes zero sense that Heather would team up with the man who killed her friends only moments earlier. But thankfully, Texas Chainsaw 3D would be ignored by the films that came after it, although those two films themselves, as in Leatherface and the 2022 Texas Chainsaw Massacre, they are just absolute turds. The death of Ben Tramer. Halloween 2. I absolutely love Halloween 2, just a great movie, one of the most underappreciated sequels of all time, being a great follow-up to John Carpenter's iconic original Halloween. However, one scene that stands out like a sore thumb is the death of Ben Tramer. That character is mentioned in passing a couple of times in the first film, as a supposed love interest for Laurie Strode, or a potential love interest for Laurie Strode, but then he's killed off in a properly jarring scene in Halloween 2's opening. With Sheriff Brackett and Sam Loomis continuing their search for Michael Myers, we see a man wearing the familiar overalls and mask so synonymous with Michael. Loomis tries to shoot the fella, but the poor bloke is then hit by a police car, which, on top of that, explodes, causing the supposed Michael Myers to be burned to death. Brackett asks if it was Michael Myers, as if Loomis could immediately tell the identity of the burning corpse, of course. But we find out the dead body is that of Ben Tramer, being at the wrong place at the wrong time, and it was all a little kinda comedic. Firstly, the sheer coincidence that someone would be wearing the exact same costume as Michael Myers. Then the high-speed car that comes literally out of nowhere. Plus the fact that the Haddonfield police just killed an innocent teenager by accident and just kinda shrugged their shoulders about it. Pancakes. Cabin fever. 2002's Cabin Fever focuses on a group of young adults who fall victim to a flesh-eating virus. And while the film launched the career of one Eli Roth, one of the most talked about moments is the pancake scene that comes completely out of nowhere. When one of our central characters, Bert, heads to a convenience store, he encounters a young boy called Dennis, who, yeah, he seems a smidge unwell, it's fair to say, shouting pancakes at Bert multiple times, pancakes, 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 performing some slow-motion martial arts moves, and then biting Bert totally for random. All as the boy's father blames Bert for all of this. It's a bizarre sight, featuring some odd dialogue, and the reason the scene exists in the first place is because Eli Roth saw Dennis actor Matthew Helms practicing Taekwondo between breaks, impressing Roth enough to add the scene at the very last minute, which is why it just totally stands out like a sore thumb. That scene, Seed of Chucky. Right, this is the entry I've been kinda dreading, as how can you really properly describe the scene? Right, this is where I try and do my best. Clearly, Chucky, or Charles Lee Ray, is an absolute maniac who has done plenty of heinous things across 7 movies and 3 seasons of the excellent Chucky TV series, which, hey, let's hope somehow, someway, someday that series is brought back for at least a 4th season. It's brilliant. Well, it's one thing to have various bloody murders dotted across each installment of the franchise. Seed of Chucky raised a fair few eyebrows for something else Chucky did during that movie. There's no way to sugarcoat this. Yep, it's the scene where Chucky masturbates into a cup. That is the scene. As for how that relates to the plot, it's part of Chucky and Tiffany's scheme to get Jennifer Tilly pregnant, but yeah, even in that context, it feels way over the top to see Chucky stroking his little good guy, should we say. Now, let's all quickly move on, shall we? Yep, sounds like a plan. The Dream Trap, Saw 3D. Likely the most popular horror franchise of the 2000s, by 2010, the Saw series had come to a point where, yeah, it was time to just knock it all on the head. And so, Saw 3D was intended to be a grandstanding, blockbuster ending for the property. Sadly, this supposed ending was riddled with terrible effects and a totally unsatisfying ending, but one particularly distracting scene involved Jigsaw's wife, Jill, and the pain train. Worried that Detective Hoffman would track her down, Jill's fears come true when she's captured and placed in the pain train, which is a motorized device that points a blade in a victim's direction. As Hoffman activates the trap, it gains speed and rips through Jill, cutting her in half. For the first time ever in the franchise though, this was a fake out, Jill actually having a nightmare, but the scene itself just looks all kinds of hokey, complete with pinkish blood and a corpse that's an obvious looking dummy, even if it was a dream, just daft. The Roaring Shark, Jaws the Revenge. For full disclosure, Jaws the Revenge is totally a guilty pleasure of mine, bringing back plenty of childhood memories and watching it with my grandparents. Jaws the Revenge is obviously also total trash, full of so many stupid things, like a great white shark tracking Ellen Brody to the Bahamas, which itself has so many questions, or the shark destroying a seaplane, or Michael Caine falling into the ocean, only to emerge minutes later and his clothes be miraculously bone dry, or Universal's decision to kill off Chief Brody off-screen and between movies. Anyway, the most out-of-place Jaws the Revenge moment, that comes during the film's climax, as the shark jumps out of the water as part of its attack on our remaining characters. Here, the shark actually roars, like loud, prolonged, and just... yeah, seriously, again with Jaws the Revenge and its many head-scratching decisions. Now, we had technically seen a shark or two make a sound in the previous movies, but never as pronounced as here in Jaws the Revenge. Of course, sharks do not make noise, and sharks certainly do not roar, mainly because sharks don't even have vocal cords, meaning they're incapable of making any noise. But still, Jaws the Revenge, man, a total guilty pleasure of yours truly.